It was supposed to be a simple evening, a quiet dinner by myself, at a place I'd read about for years, Vera's, the kind of restaurant that only appeared in glossy magazines, the kind of place you went to not just to eat, but to be seen eating. It sat nestled between high-end boutiques and wine bars, its name scrolled in gold above two black marble doors. I had passed it so many times, always thinking, maybe someday. That night, I decided someday had come. I had my reasons. I wore my best coat. It was old, yes, but cashmere. I had pearls around my neck, real ones, not the kind you get in department stores. My purse was vintage leather, worn at the corners, but the bills inside it were crisp. When I pushed open the door, the scent of rosemary and grilled sea bass swept over me. A pianist played softly in the corner. A couple near the bar sipped cocktails with orange peels floating on top. It was elegant. It was warm. Then she looked at me, the hostess, blonde, maybe 30, with a tablet in her hand and judgment in her eyes. Her glance slid from my shoes to my gray hair like a scanner calculating my worth. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her smile as thin as her patience. I nodded. "Yes, for one. Under Helen." She tapped the tablet, then gave a little frown. I'm not seeing it." She didn't look again. Didn't try. Just stood there, waiting for me to disappear. "Could I still be seated?" I asked gently. She blinked. "We have a dress code," she said, gesturing at my shoes. "We try to keep things upscale." My coat suddenly felt like burlap. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My hands began to tremble, not with rage, but with something worse, shame. A man in a tailored suit walked in behind me. She greeted him with a smile so wide I thought her face might crack. "Right this way, Mr. Jennings," she chirped. He brushed past me without seeing me. I wasn't invisible. I was dismissed. I left without another word. Outside, the wind caught my scarf. I tugged it tight, took a deep breath, and walked away slowly. Not because I was tired, but because I was thinking. That moment should have crushed me, but it didn't. It ignited something I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about a meal. It wasn't about a hostess, or a table, or some roast duck garnished with edible flowers. This was about worth. And I had spent a lifetime earning mine. They thought I was just an old woman looking for soup. They had no idea I owned the recipe for vengeance. The phrase rang in my ears the entire walk home. "We have a dress code." She said it with such finality, like a judge handing down a sentence. And maybe in her eyes, I had been sentenced to invisibility, to being the kind of person who should know better than to show up in a place like that. I walked past glittering storefronts I used to visit decades ago, back when I had my late husband James by my side. James always said, "They don't see the diamonds in your soul if they're too busy judging the shoes on your feet." He used to buy me little gifts, trinkets, pieces of jewelry I rarely wore, but never parted with. That night, I sat in my small apartment, lit only by the lamp James had rewired himself. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out a velvet pouch. Inside were two things: a pair of diamond earrings I'd never worn since his funeral, and a bank envelope I hadn't looked at in nearly 4 years. I unfolded the deposit slips. James had left me more than memories. He'd left me investments, silent ones, smart ones, things I didn't understand at the time, but learned to manage after the grief settled. And the total, enough to buy the building Vera's sat in. Twice. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I made tea, wrote a list on a yellow notepad, and stared at the restaurant's website. Owned by Marshall Reed. Leased monthly. Yelp rating 4.1. Looking for investors. That last line made my eyebrow rise. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was recognition. And maybe redemption. Because that moment at the door wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who's been told she's too old, too late, or not enough. Every woman who's ever stood quietly in front of someone who decided she didn't belong. The diamonds in my drawer weren't just pretty stones. They were reminders that I came from a love so rich, no maitre d' could calculate it. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to complain on social media. I wasn't going to call the manager. I was going to do something far more permanent. I was going to buy back the dignity they tried to steal. I zipped the pouch closed, pressed it to my chest, and whispered to James, "Let's go have dinner, our way." And that night, for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel old. I felt ready. I ended up at a little diner that night, Tina's Place, a corner booth, vinyl seats, chipped coffee mugs, the kind of place where the waitresses know your name and call you hon without irony. I'd eaten there 100 times over the years, always grateful for the warmth, the grease, the familiarity. But that night, nothing tasted right. I ordered the meatloaf and mashed potatoes, not because I wanted it, but because it was what I always ordered when I needed comfort. When James passed, that's what I ate for 3 nights straight. The waitress, Margot, smiled and said, "Rough day, sugar." I nodded. "Something like that." She topped off my coffee. "Well, you're still standing. That counts." Still standing. I pushed the meatloaf around on my plate with a fork, watching the brown gravy trail across the white porcelain like a map going nowhere. My appetite was gone, and not from sadness, from clarity. That moment at Vera's hadn't just bruised my ego. It opened a part of me I didn't know still existed, a part that remembered walking beside James through tough neighborhoods, buying buildings others had given up on. I remembered painting walls with my own hands, picking out restaurant chairs from auction houses, negotiating contracts in rooms full of men who never expected the woman beside James to speak. But I had spoken. I had closed deals. Somehow, over time, I'd shrunk. I had folded myself down into the role of widow, grandmother, retired woman who volunteers at the library. People saw soft sweaters and white hair and assumed the gears had stopped turning. But inside, there was a fire that never quite went out. That dinner at the diner wasn't a defeat. It was a pause, a breath. I left a big tip, walked out into the night, and looked up at the stars. The sky over Florida is wide, especially in winter, clear and deep. I whispered, "I'm not done, James." The next morning, I called my lawyer. Then I called my old friend Carla. She used to flip commercial properties before she retired, which never really stuck. By noon, we had a meeting set with the building's leasing agent. And by 3 o'clock, I had put in a cash offer. A cash offer on the very space that told me I wasn't welcome. Not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I knew I could turn that building into something better than it ever had been. Something that saw everyone. The leasing agent's office smelled like citrus and arrogance. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons, the kind you'd see at yacht clubs. His handshake was limp, and his smile was too quick to be real. "Mrs. Allard, was it?" he asked, skimming my name like it didn't matter. I corrected him gently. "Helen Ward." He raised an eyebrow when I slid the folder across his desk. Inside was a bank-certified offer, cash ready, with contingencies clearly marked. Carla sat beside me, silent but sharp. She didn't come to play dress up. She came to back me up. He flipped the folder open, scanned it, then chuckled. "You do realize this space has a wait list. We've had interest from some major brands, tech startups, boutique concepts. It's competitive." I looked him in the eye. "And I have the money. And the vision." He leaned back, folding his hands. "It's just, look, this isn't personal, ma'am, but this property, it's not typically for people like you." I smiled. "Good, because I'm not typical." That shut him up. Carla smirked. He cleared his throat. "Well, I'll need to run this through the board." "Of course," I said, standing up. "And I'll be waiting, with my attorney on standby." The walk out of that office felt like a victory, even if it wasn't official yet. I could feel James walking beside me, his hand at the small of my back like he used to do. Carla and I grabbed coffee after. She sipped her black with lemon and said, "You know, you could have retired to Boca and lived quietly." "I was living quietly," I said. "And look where that got me." What I didn't tell her was how loud the silence had become in my life, how easy it was to vanish when no one's watching, how that hostess had pulled back a curtain I didn't even know I was hiding behind. That weekend, I received the call. The board had accepted my offer. No counter, no conditions, just one sentence from the agent that stuck with me. "You move fast for someone your age." I laughed into the receiver. "That's because I've already wasted enough time." I hung up the phone and looked around my apartment. Suddenly, everything looked too small, because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just buying a restaurant. I was reclaiming space, in the city, in society, in myself. And soon, they were going to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been quiet too long. The keys jingled like music in my coat pocket. Carla handed them to me in the parking lot, grinning like we'd just robbed a bank. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked. I didn't even blink. I was born ready. I just forgot for a while. The building looked different now. Same bricks, same windows, but I saw it with new eyes. No longer the place where I was turned away. Now it was a canvas, a challenge, a chance. I stepped inside for the first time as the owner. It smelled of citrus cleaner and stale wine. The velvet booths were still plush. The silverware sparkled, but what caught me off guard was the silence. Without guests, the restaurant felt hollow, like a body with no heartbeat. I ran my fingers along the host stand, where I had once been dismissed. That woman, whoever she was gone now. Probably had no idea the lady she sent away came back to buy the place beneath her feet. And maybe that was the best part. I didn't fire her, not yet. I didn't need revenge. I needed vision. I walked every inch of the building, the kitchen, the wine cellar, the rooftop patio no one ever opened. It felt like discovering buried treasure, and the more I uncovered, the more I remembered who I had once been. Helen Ward, the woman who used to write checks and set menus and hire chefs before she became someone's grandma who needs a hobby. That night, I stayed after dark. I sat alone in the booth by the window and watched the streetlights come on. People passed by, never guessing that the woman sipping tea in the corner owned the whole block now. That's the thing about power, real power. It doesn't have to shout, it just is. Before I left, I taped a note to the door. Closed for rebirth, opening soon. And in smaller print underneath, I wrote, for everyone they said didn't belong. Because this wasn't just going to be a restaurant. It was going to be mine, not just in deed, but in spirit. A place where no one would be measured by their shoes, their age, or the shine on their handbag. A place where old women in faded cardigans could sit next to tech bros in Rolexes, and no one would blink. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and in that quiet moment, I whispered something only the walls could hear. "Welcome home, Helen." The first contractor I met looked like he walked straight off a reality show. Gold chain, mirror shades, too much cologne. He glanced at my plans for the redesign and raised an eyebrow like I'd handed him a child's crayon sketch. "You're planning to open in how long?" he asked. 6 weeks, I said calmly. "I want the dining room resurfaced, kitchen updated, and patio opened. Nothing extravagant, just smart." He flipped the folder shut and leaned back in his chair. "Listen, ma'am, no offense, but you're too old to run a place like this. It's a young person's game. Trends, TikTok, energy. This isn't a book club." I smiled, not because I was amused, because that sentence confirmed I'd hired the wrong man. I stood up. "You're right about one thing. This isn't a book club, and I don't hire people who underestimate me before they even look at the numbers." His jaw dropped just enough for satisfaction. Carla laughed when I told her. By the end of the week, I had a new team. A younger designer who used to work in New York but had moved back to care for her father. A line cook with a past who just wanted a fresh start. And a contractor named Reggie who didn't flinch when I said the word vision. They didn't see me as a grandmother trying to play restaurateur. They saw me as a woman with a purpose and a signed checkbook. I worked right alongside them, paint in my hair, measuring tape around my neck. One of the bartenders, a girl named Tessa, said, "Miss Helen, you hustle like a 20-year-old. Flattery gets you extra shifts," I joked. But deep down, her words meant the world. Because no one had said something kind about my work in years. They'd said inspirational, sweet, brave, but not capable. And capable is what I always was. Every night after the team left, I stayed behind. I played old jazz through the speakers, swept the floor, and stared at the blueprints. This was more than a reopening. This was a statement, a rebellion dressed in hardwood and light fixtures. And as I adjusted the sign that would hang out front, I caught my reflection in the glass. Silver hair, paint on my cheek, eyes that no longer looked tired. "You're too old," he had said. If only he knew. I'm just getting started. I didn't want revenge. Truly, I wasn't looking to humiliate the hostess who sneered at my shoes, or the manager who never looked up from his clipboard. I didn't want to fire anyone in public or watch them grovel. What I wanted was something bigger, bolder, lasting. I wanted to flip the table, not just eat at it. So I designed a restaurant that did what no other place in that overpriced district dared to do. Welcome everyone. No dress codes, no maitre d's trained to size you up from your purse. No assumption that old meant poor or irrelevant. The name, Evergreen. Because I was done being seasonal. The opening date was set. The PR firm Carla connected me with raised an eyebrow at my ideas. "You want to serve $5 soup next to $30 wine?" the rep asked. "Yes," I said, "because dignity doesn't come with a price tag." We printed menus with large fonts. We placed reading glasses in the hostess drawer. Every table had space for a walker or stroller. I added acoustic panels because older ears deserve comfort too. The kitchen staff thought I was a little eccentric, but they also knew I paid well, listened more than I talked, and showed up every single day. That earned respect faster than any CEO title. One night, Reggie pulled me aside. "Helen," he said, "what exactly are we building here?" "A place for the ones they stopped seeing," I replied. He nodded. "Then I'm all in." On the eve of opening, I walked through the space alone. The lighting was warm, the cutlery gleamed, and the scent of lemon rosemary lingered in the air. It was beautiful. But it wasn't just about decor. It was about what this space meant. A woman once told me to wait quietly in the lobby while they found a manager. Now I am the manager. And tomorrow the doors would open. Not just for me, not just for the guests, but for every woman who had ever been told, "You're too late." Because Evergreen wasn't just a restaurant. It was a revolution, served hot and plated with grace. The doors opened at 6 p.m. sharp. A line had formed outside Evergreen long before that. Some folks in silk scarves, others in flannel coats, a few in faded jeans and Sunday shoes. That's how I knew I'd done it right, because they didn't look like each other. They looked like everyone. Inside, candles flickered, silverware clinked, and soft piano played over the speakers. It was perfect. I stood just out of sight in the back hallway, peeking between the swinging kitchen doors like a nervous bride. My heart beat like a drum solo. It wasn't fear, it was pride. Then Carla tapped my shoulder. "Don't freak out," she whispered. "But she's here." I blinked. "Who?" "The hostess, from back then." I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my expression calm. "Table for how many?" "Just her, alone." Of course it would be that way. I stepped out front. The second our eyes met, I saw the flicker of recognition in hers. The way her brow lifted. The way she suddenly adjusted her purse strap. She hadn't changed much. Still poised, still pretty. But something in her face read tired now. Tired in a way I understood. "Good evening," I said smoothly. "Welcome to Evergreen." She opened her mouth, closed it, finally whispered, "You look familiar." I nodded. "I used to stand right over there, trying to get a table." Her face flushed. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." I raised a hand gently. "It's all right. We all learn at different paces." She looked down. "May I still dine here?" I smiled. "Of course, everyone belongs here. That's the point." I led her to a corner booth, the same one I'd sat in alone weeks ago, dreaming of this moment. She glanced at the menu and whispered, "This place is beautiful." I leaned in slightly. "So are second chances." That night, the restaurant buzzed with joy. No one noticed the quiet exchange in the corner, but I did. I watched a woman eat alone and leave with tears in her eyes, not because she'd been humiliated, but because she'd been welcomed. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about hers, too, and his, and theirs. This place would become more than I ever imagined, and I was just getting started. 3 days after opening, the phone rang. It was Carla, breathless. "You're trending on local foodie Twitter." "Is that a good thing?" I asked, wiping down the bar with lemon oil. "Depends," she said. "Someone leaked your age." Ah, there it was. The first article headline read, "Grandma buys fancy restaurant, opens it, doesn't die." Cute. The comments were worse. "How's she even lifting a pan?" Another vanity project from someone bored in retirement. "I bet the food tastes like regret and arthritis." I read every single one of them. Not because I believed them, but because I wanted to remember exactly who I was doing this for. The next day, a review came out from a food critic named Jeffrey Crane. He had a reputation for being ruthless. The man once called a beloved French bistro a soggy towel with garlic. So when he walked into Evergreen wearing a navy suit and a smirk, the staff froze. I didn't. I brought him his appetizer myself. Creamy butternut soup with cracked black pepper and roasted pecans. He raised an eyebrow. "You're the owner?" "Yes," I said. "And the woman who roasted those pecans this morning." He tasted, paused, took another spoonful, then said nothing for the rest of the meal. The review was published the next morning. I went expecting to write a eulogy. I left trying to book a reservation. Evergreen is not a pity project. It is a quietly radical reimagining of grace. Come for the food, stay for the soul. The phone rang non-stop for days. Carla nearly cried. Reggie did cry. And I poured myself a cup of hibiscus tea, sat at table 6, and let the joy rise slowly through my chest, like sunrise on old bones. They had laughed. Then they ate, and left full, not just in their bellies, but in something deeper. It was a Thursday afternoon. Rain tapped gently on the windows, and the usual lull between lunch and dinner had set in. I was wiping down the counter when I saw him through the glass. Eli, my grandson. He looked older than I remembered, taller, leaner, hair longer than his mother would have allowed. He stood just outside, staring up at the gold script on the door, Evergreen. He didn't move for nearly a full minute. I stepped forward, opened the door myself. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, like we'd just bumped into each other at the grocery store. He blinked. "Grandma, come in. You'll catch cold." He stepped in, but his eyes scanned every corner. "You own this?" "I do." A pause. "You made this?" "Yes." Another pause. His voice cracked. "I thought you were in a facility." Dad said. I shook my head gently. "Your dad said a lot of things. Some of them weren't true." He sat at the bar, shoulders tight. "I made him a hot cocoa, the same way I did when he was 5, with cinnamon and a single marshmallow." He took a sip, said nothing, but his eyes said everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "I didn't want to pull you into the middle," I replied. "You were still a kid. You didn't deserve the wait." He looked down. "I want to know now." So I told him. Not everything. Not the coldest parts, but enough. How I was written off. How I was pushed out quietly, politely, like a guest whose time had expired. How this restaurant wasn't just a dream. It was survival. And then I told him something else. This place, it's for people like me. And one day, maybe, people like you too. Because everyone's underestimated eventually. Everyone's dismissed. He didn't say much after that, just sat there, finished his cocoa, and hugged me so tight I nearly dropped the mug. Before he left, he looked around once more and said, "You made something real." "I know," I said, smiling. And after he walked out into the rain, I stood alone for a moment, pressing my palm to the counter where his hand had been. Maybe I wasn't just rebuilding my life. Maybe I was rebuilding ours. I hadn't seen Gerald in over a decade. Not since the divorce was finalized, and he moved to Arizona with the woman from the yoga studio. That's how I always referred to her. No name, just a title, a placeholder for betrayal. So imagine my surprise when I looked up from the host stand and saw him standing there in a sport coat, 2 sizes too big, hair whiter, gut fuller, but that same old smug gleam still hanging in his eyes like an untucked shirt. He adjusted his collar and said, "Helen." I gave him my best restaurant smile. "Gerald, you still breathing? Imagine that." He chuckled, like this was just a friendly run-in at a high school reunion. I heard about the place, figured I'd see what the fuss was about. I bit my tongue. The fuss. I seated him myself, table 4, far from the bar, near the window, away from my regulars, who didn't deserve to inhale stale regret. He looked over the wine list, then waved me over. "Any recommendations?" I leaned in slightly. "Yes, the one with the deepest regret and the longest finish." He smirked. "You always were sharp. And you always were ordinary." He raised a glass. "To survival." I didn't clink mine, just nodded. "You know what's funny?" I said. "You always told me I was too sensitive, too soft, that I'd never make it on my own." He sipped. "We both said things." "No, Gerald. You said things." I listened. And then I left. And then I built all of this. He looked around. And for the first time, the smugness faded. "It's beautiful. You did well." There it was. The closest thing to an apology he could muster. But I didn't need it. Because I was no longer the woman who begged him to notice her. I was the woman people now made reservations to speak to. He finished his drink. Didn't order food. Just sat in silence a while, then stood and reached for his wallet. I stopped him. "It's on the house." "Out of pity?" he asked. "Out of power," I replied. "I can offer kindness now, because I'm no longer trying to survive. I'm thriving." He walked out slower than he came in. I watched through the glass as he disappeared down the street, swallowed by the city that once swallowed me. And then I turned back to my kitchen, to my team, to my future, because I had a dinner rush coming, and no ghosts were going to make me late for it. I never expected a glowing review from Marcia. My daughter-in-law had always looked at me like I was a relic of a time she didn't sign up for. Too opinionated, too present, too much of a reminder that her husband had a mother who mattered. But even I was surprised when I read what she posted online. It was a blog entry titled, "The Restaurant My Mother-in-Law Opened, and Why You Should Skip It." Charming. She went on about how the decor was tacky, the menu ambitious but confused, and the owner clearly playing pretend with retirement funds. She even added a photo of the corner booth with the caption, "Where old dreams go to die," apparently. The thing is, she'd never even been inside. I sat there at the bar, rereading her words. Reggie saw my face and paused while restocking the liquor shelf. "You okay, boss?" I nodded. "Yep, just got the best publicity money can't buy." Because what Marcia didn't understand was that every word of her bitterness confirmed something I'd suspected for a long time. She was scared. Scared that I still had chapters left to write, that her vision of me as the quiet, wilting elder was being rewritten nightly over candlelight and crème brûlée. So I did what any former teacher turned restaurateur would do. I printed the blog post, framed it in gold, and hung it in the hallway between the restrooms. At the bottom, I added a brass plaque. "Criticism is a sign that you're no longer invisible." 2 days later, customers started taking selfies with it. Carla nearly fell over laughing. "You're turning hate into hospitality." "I'm turning it into hardwood," I said. "Strong, polished, and something people can lean on." I wrote Marcia a thank you note. Didn't mail it, but I wrote it. "Dear Marcia, thank you for reminding me that not everyone will cheer when you rise. Some will throw stones, others will write blog posts, But some, like me, will build doorways with those stones and keep walking. That night, we sold out of our duck confit before 8 p.m. And while I sliced lemons behind the bar, a couple from DC came up and said, "We only came because of that blog post. We had to see it for ourselves." They left with a reservation for next Friday. So thank you, Marcia. You may have meant to bury me, but you handed me a shovel, and I built a garden. It was a rainy Tuesday when the reporter showed up, young, eager, with a notepad bigger than her confidence, and a cameraman who kept trying to make the soup station look cinematic. She introduced herself as Dana from the Baltimore Beacon. "We're doing a feature on late-in-life entrepreneurship," she said, eyes bright, like she'd just stumbled into a gold mine. I agreed to the interview, mostly because I like the sound of entrepreneurship next to my name. It made me feel like a woman in boots, kicking through doors, not a grandmother in an apron. We sat at table 7. She adjusted her recorder and started with easy questions. "What made you want to start this place? What does success look like to you? Do you ever sleep in?" I answered politely, smiling when needed, stirring my tea when she needed time to catch up on notes. And then she asked the question, the one that slipped past her smile and hit me square in the chest. "Do you ever get lonely?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. I looked at her, looked at the steam curling from my cup. "No," I said slowly. "I don't get lonely. I've been lonely, and it's not the same." She blinked. "Lonely," I continued, "is what you feel when you're surrounded by people who make you invisible. When your voice fades in the room, even though you're speaking. When they hand you a cake on your 70th birthday and still treat you like you're fading." Dana scribbled fast, but I wasn't finished. "Here, I'm not invisible. I'm not alone. I've got 20 burners going, 6 employees, a line at the door, and a growing stack of reviews, good and bad. This place breathes because I breathe into it." She swallowed. "That's powerful," I smiled. "It's just true." The article came out the following Sunday. The headline, "Not just a grandma. Helen built a kingdom of flame and grit." They printed it with a photo of me holding a whisk like a scepter. My phone rang off the hook. Local radio called. A podcast invited me on. One woman drove down from Delaware just to shake my hand and say, "Thank you for showing me what's possible." "No, Dana, I'm not lonely. I'm just getting started." It was nearly closing time, and I had just finished stacking the dessert trays when I heard the door jingle. I looked up, expecting a delivery man, or maybe Carla, returning for her wallet again. But it was a woman I'd never seen before. She was soaked to the bone, her mascara streaking like ink down a page. And she looked around like she wasn't sure where she was or how she'd gotten here. "Ma'am," I asked gently. Her lip trembled. I'm sorry, I just needed to be somewhere warm." I nodded. "You came to the right place." I poured her a mug of chamomile without asking. She wrapped her fingers around it like it was a lifeline. We sat in silence. I didn't prod. I just let her breathe. After a few minutes, she whispered, "He left. Took everything. Even the cat." Her name was Joanna, 38. Hadn't worked since college. Had no family nearby. She said she saw the article about me in the paper. Didn't think she'd ever walk through the doors, but her feet had a mind of their own. I didn't offer sympathy. I offered her an apron. "You know how to peel garlic." She blinked. "Excuse me. Garlic," I said, walking her toward the kitchen. It doesn't need a resume, it just needs hands. She smiled, barely, but it was a start. I gave her the station next to Carla and told her to follow the rhythm of the room. Stir when they stir, chop when they chop, cry if you need to. No one will mind. Onions have always been our excuse. By the end of the night, she had peeled 24 cloves, folded 70 napkins, and wiped down the dessert cooler. When she returned the apron, she said, "I don't know what this was, but I needed it." I smiled. "Come back tomorrow. Bring shoes you can stand in." She did. She came back the next day, and the day after. Soon Joanna wasn't just peeling garlic. She was laughing. She was tasting sauces. She was humming to Billie Holiday while prepping tables. People think restaurants serve food, but sometimes we serve second chances. The invitation came in a blue envelope with gold trim, fancier than anything I'd received since my wedding anniversary cards from Walt. It was from the Women's Resilience Summit downtown. They wanted me to be a keynote guest to speak about reinvention after 60. I laughed so hard, Carla thought I'd lost it. "You? A speaker?" she said with a grin. "You've been preaching to us every night at table 5. Still, I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't my stage anymore. My world had become cutting boards and stovetops, not auditoriums, but something inside me, it wasn't pride exactly, something deeper, said, "Go." So I went. I wore my only blazer, the navy one with the pinstripe cuffs. I practiced my story in the mirror, not for perfection, but for truth. When I stood before that microphone, I saw rows of women. Some wore pearls, some wore pain, some sat alone like I once had. I took a breath and said, "My name is Helen Ashford. I'm 72. I was once a teacher, then a widow, then a ghost in my own family's life. They forgot me, until I refused to forget myself." The room fell silent. I told them about the restaurant, the insult at the luxury lounge, the bad blog review, Joanna crying in the foyer. And then I said the one thing I hadn't even written down. Don't wait for permission to live out loud. No one hands you a second act. You write it in the margins of the first. There were tears, standing applause. One woman hugged me in the hallway and whispered, "You said the thing I've been afraid to say." I left that summit with more than a thank you bag and a free lanyard. I left with momentum. A week later, a college student emailed me asking to shadow me for a project on community impact. A retired nurse dropped by to offer her help 3 days a week. The restaurant became more than a business. It became a movement, and I became the woman I had almost forgotten, lived inside me. It was Thursday, split pea soup day, when she walked in. I noticed her not because of her age, or her gait, or the quiet way she entered, but because of her hat, crimson red, wide-brimmed, tilted just slightly to the left, like a woman who knew how to carry her regrets with grace. She didn't sit right away. She walked the perimeter of the dining room, trailing a gloved finger along the windowsill like she was reading the dust. Then she picked a booth in the corner, alone. I brought her soup myself. "You're new," I said softly. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Not as new as I'd like to be." We didn't talk much that first time. She left a generous tip and a note under her bowl. "Thank you for not asking more than I could give today." The second time, she asked my name. The third time, she asked if I remembered a Miss Bradford from Briarwood Elementary, 1982. I froze. "I was Miss Bradford," she whispered. Suddenly, the red hat made sense. She had been my colleague, my supervisor, technically. She had also been the woman who signed the letter, forcing me to take unpaid leave after Walt's first stroke. The woman who said, "Family comes first, but policy comes firster." We sat at table 2. She stirred her soup slowly. The steam framed her face like fog over a battlefield. "I was wrong back then," she said, "but I didn't know how to be anything but what the system asked me to be." I didn't say anything. I followed rules. I protected reputations. I didn't protect people, she added. Her voice broke. "I read about you in the paper. I came to say, I'm sorry." And there it was, 40 years late, wrapped in wool and soup, and a hat the color of her shame. I looked her in the eye, took her hand. "We all did what we thought survival looked like," I said. "Now we know better, so we do better." She wept. I brought her tea on the house, and when she left, she placed the red hat gently on the counter and said, "Keep it, for the days you forget how far you've come." I haven't worn it, but I keep it near the register, to remember that some apologies are quiet, but they still change the air in a room. I knew something was off the moment the front bell chimed, and no one walked in smiling. He wore khakis, too stiff to bend, and glasses that never blinked. Clipboard in hand, badge at the collar. "Health and safety inspection," he said flatly. "Routine." Carla's eyes darted toward me. "Is this because of the article?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just nodded to the inspector and said, "Welcome. Can I offer you a coffee while you look around?" He didn't answer, just clicked his pen and went straight to the kitchen. He checked fridge temps, lifted lids, scribbled notes, tapped a measuring stick along the tile grout like he was hunting for rebellion. But then he paused. He saw the framed photo of Walt near the dish sink. "Your husband?" he asked. "Yes, lost him 3 years ago." He looked again. "My dad was a chef, died in his kitchen, heart attack. Place was called Louie's Crab Shack, Baltimore." I smiled. I remember Louie's. The hush puppies were like religion. He blinked at me, almost smiled, and then moved to the dry storage. But something shifted. His movements softened, less like a man hunting violations, more like someone walking through memories. He stopped again near the staff bulletin board. There was a quote tacked up. Joanna had pinned it last week. "In this place, we feed the body, but also the forgotten parts of the soul." He read it twice, then he turned. "You know you're technically not zoned for community events." "I do." "You host classes, free literacy sessions on Thursdays, crochet nights on Sundays, just neighbors helping neighbors." He tapped his pen against the clipboard, and then handed it to me. "Your water heater's 2 degrees low," he said. "Fix it. Everything else is fine." He paused at the door. "Places like this, they're rare. Keep doing what you're doing. Just maybe tighten your trash bins." I nodded. "Yes, sir." He didn't smile, but he tipped his cap, and for me, that was enough. It was a Saturday rush when I saw her standing just outside the glass door. Headphones on, hoodie halfway zipped, hair dyed, a color no fruit should ever be. Joanna, my granddaughter. She hadn't visited since she was 14. Back then, she still called me Nana and drew stick figures of us holding hands. But time, grief, and her mother's bitterness had stretched a canyon between us. Still, there she was. I wiped my hands and walked out front. "Joanna," she looked up and took one headphone out. "Hey." We stood there like strangers who knew too much. "I saw the story online," she said. "You're kind of famous now." I laughed. "Just a local woman who likes feeding people." She looked past me into the dining room. Is it always this full? Most days, we do okay. She hesitated. Can I see the kitchen? I stepped aside, let her pass. She wandered through the back like she was walking a museum, touched the spice rack, peeked into the walk-in cooler, stared at the photo of Walt and me on opening day. Mom said you went nuts after Grandpa died, she whispered. I paused. I did, in a way, but not how she meant. She looked at me then, really looked. You made this, from scratch, no loans, no help. She smiled. That's actually kind of cool. I nearly dropped the soup ladle. We sat at the prep table. I gave her a bowl of gumbo and told her how I sourced every ingredient from small local farms. She told me about her college apps and the band she wanted to start and the poetry she didn't let anyone read. And for a moment, we weren't grandma and granddaughter. We were just two women, eating soup, being seen. Can I come back? She asked, licking the spoon. You'd better. Before she left, she took a selfie of us, posted it with the caption, "My Nana is officially cooler than me." Legend. Later that night, I stood alone in the dining room, lights low, chairs up, and I whispered, "Thank you, God, for second chances and split pea soup." I never imagined I'd stand behind a microphone again, at least not without a whiteboard and a classroom behind me. But there I was, under a chandelier in the City Hall ballroom, holding a plaque that read, "Community Beacon Award, Millie Allard." The room was filled with faces I didn't know, and a few I'd fed, local officials, news crews, even the mayor. I was told I'd have 5 minutes to speak. I wrote down 12. I used 6. "This place saved me," I began. "Not the award, not the applause. This life, a life built from cardboard boxes and the stubborn refusal to vanish." I talked about the diner, about the students who learned to read over pancakes, about the crocheted scarves we donated to shelters, about the late-night soup deliveries during power outages, about what it means to still matter. And then, out of the corner of my eye, Darren, and behind him, Katie, my granddaughter, taller now, hair in a braid, holding a small bouquet. They stood near the exit, unsure if they were welcome. I looked straight at them. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "the people who forgot you are the same people who one day remember. If you're lucky, they show up in time." My voice didn't tremble, my heart did. Afterward, there were flashes and handshakes, posing with city council, hugs from strangers. But it was Katie who stepped forward first. "You look pretty, Grandma." "So do you, baby girl." She handed me the flowers. They were daisies, my favorite. I hadn't told her that in years. Darren approached next. He looked thinner, older, like a man who'd been carrying a guilt he couldn't name. "I'm sorry," he said. 3 words. Years. Overdue. But there. I nodded. "That's a start." He glanced at the plaque. "I didn't know you had this in you." I met his eyes. "I always had it. You just stopped looking." We stood in silence, not healed, but maybe beginning. That night, I placed the plaque beside Walt's photo, lit a candle, poured myself a small glass of wine, and said aloud to the quiet kitchen, "You were right, love. I wasn't done yet." They laughed at first when the rumors started that the little old woman with the Sunday pies had bought the whole block. "What, that lady? The one who used to live in a storage unit?" "Yes, that lady." I used the diner's success, the news coverage, and a quiet inheritance Walt left me, money I didn't even know existed, to buy 5 adjacent properties on my street. They were run down, forgotten, like I had once been. One became a shelter for older women left behind by their families. Another, a free daycare run by retired teachers. A third, my favorite, was a tiny library with a rocking chair out front. I sat there every Thursday and read stories to whoever would listen. I named the block the Millie Way. No gates, no fees, no judgment. Just a row of homes where the only requirement was kindness. I built it not because I was strong, but because I remembered what it felt like to be made invisible. People stopped calling me poor Millie. They started calling me Ms. Allard, then founder, then my favorite, friend. One morning, a woman in a faded coat showed up. She looked around and asked, "Is this place really for someone like me?" I held her hand. "Especially someone like you. Katie visits every Sunday now. We bake. She helps with bookkeeping. She said she wants to open a youth center someday. Next to yours, Nana. Darren, he's quieter. He mows the lawns, fixes fences. I let him, because sometimes redemption is silent labor. I still live above the diner, still make the same soup Walt loved, still light a candle by his photo each night. And sometimes I walk the street, my street, and smile at the laughter echoing from every porch, because they thought I was finished, because they thought age meant expiration, because they thought silence meant surrender. But they forgot one thing. I had lived too long, lost too much, and seen too many sunsets to not rise again. And I didn't just rise. I built a life that couldn't be boxed up. And now, I leave the door open for whoever comes next.